Hi folks, we're Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the issues around ideological government rather than elected democratic government, and the manner in which the paranoia, which, if you like, the ideological government seeks to protect itself. Now, imposed ideological government is not legitimate. It doesn't seek the support or the agreement of the people. In fact, the opposite is the case. So where the government is not legitimate and its policies and its management is not voted for or supported, then it has a natural built-in paranoia around its own illegitimacy. So in order to create artificial legitimacy, it must crush all alternative opinions, whether that be in open dissent, open defiance, simply disagreement, opinions that maybe it doesn't like, or views by the citizenry that run contrary to the policy positions of that government. Now, remember, ideological government is only ever imposed from the top down. It doesn't occur from the bottom up. Now, there's a view that some starry-eyed sort of leftists may think that, well, the peasants rise up and it's the workers' paradise, but it's always a relatively small intellectual leftist elite, whether it's the Bolsheviks in the Soviet Union or Chairman Mao's goons in China or Pol Pot and his heavies in Cambodia. It just doesn't matter. It's being imposed, and therefore, if it's being imposed, it lacks the basic legitimacy. On top of that, it also lacks the legitimacy that comes from the natural course of events, the organic development of things. For example, pretty much everything, whether it be technological or otherwise, that we see around us has a long history of development over time. So there was a natural trial and error process, whether it be in the law, whether it be growing crops, whether it be technology. For example, here's a sort of a simple one: the metallurgical capacity to create a boiler, a steam boiler, that could hold enough pressure to actually drive a heavy engine. Steam power was in its early stages was developed, not around 200 AD, I think, going off the top of my head, or somewhere in that. I think it was being used in Alexandria and Egypt and around parts of Europe, the Roman Empire, that sort of thing. But they could never seal the boiler. They never had the metallurgical or the alloys, the metal alloys needed to weld and seal a boiler together. They never had that technology until the modern steam engine was invented, particularly the heavy pressure boiler capacity, until the 1800s. So, and lots of trial and error in metallurgy went into that, and there were steps forward and steps back and so on. And it was a high risk game. If the boiler blew up, then the inventor and all his buddies could get nuked in the process. But so ideological government doesn't have that. It's an idea, a set of ideas that's imposed from above, that is believed to be some sort of nirvana or paradise, that it can exist only in the imagination, rather than through, again, either the support of the public, or through the organic natural course of events and development of social relations, financial systems, technology, and so on. Ideological government has none of those things. It's imposed from above without the agreement of the people, and again, without that organic development. So it's ultimately doomed to failure, as it was in, all over there's not a single communist country that's government that's succeeded. There have been some possibilities. For example, the Salvador Allende government that was elected in Chile when was it? The early 1970s, I think, from memory. And but then that was heavily influenced by communist agitators and stirrers and activists and so on. So to what extent that was a free and fair election, you could question. It was then undermined and eventually got rid of by American activism, CIA, all that sort of thing. Whether or not it would have survived very long, that you could question. But anyway, no government, communist government, ideological government, all communist governments are, survived. The only sort of quasi-ideological government that even started and survived with quite serious support of the people was the Nazi government, the National Socialist government in Germany. That did have a large political following, and given it was able to get results quite quickly once in government, it also had a very strong support base. That wasn't imposed government in the same way that the communist governments were. It didn't come to office at the point of a gun or anything like that, which again, communist governments invariably tend to, with the odd South American rare exception. Now, let's have a look at where ideological governments fear certain things. They fear different opinions and different views and so on. They don't fear the criminal, the murderer, the thief, they are not a threat to ideological government. Ideological power is not threatened by murderers running around or again, thieves, armed robbers, or that sort of thing. That's not, looters looting shops. That's not a threat to ideological government. Someone who holds the wrong opinion or a differing opinion or a contrary opinion, that is a potential threat to ideological government. And thus you see the difference in how such governments view the different type. One is not a crime, but is treated as one. It's a thought crime. The other, the murdering and so on, is a crime, but it's not a threat to the power. So they're treated very differently. So I want to sort of highlight here the case of, which is getting worldwide attention, the case of Mrs. Lucy Connolly in Britain. Now, Mrs. Connolly made, I think it was some tweets or some online postings, I don't know if it was on Twitter or not, but made some online postings that, I wouldn't have made them, but nonetheless, they were, given the circumstances, situation, the timing, were expressing some exasperation by a local British white, straight white citizen about the mass migration and how the authorities seem to take a particularly lenient view on black and brown type crime, but not so lenient a view on white people having the wrong opinion. So she was arrested and charged and dragged into court and was given a prison sentence of 2.5 years. I think it was 2.5 years. Now I've had a look at the supposed, the online postings, and for the life of me, I can't see 2.5 years of prison time or any prison time or even a fine for that. So this is a very zealous pursuit of a private citizen who's committed no crime, has no history of crime, not a long rap sheet or anything like that, and is given 2.5 years in prison for postings. Now, the claim that as I understand it, the claim is that the judge, or I think it might have been an appeal court here, but one of the judges at least wrote that you were attempting to incite hatred. Now, this is a big hallmark of ideological government. We know what you're thinking, what you were thinking was this. So the evidence bar, I don't think that Mrs. Connolly was trying to incite hatred, or certainly not that I can pick up out of the tweets. That's my view, of course. But how did the judge know that that's what you were trying to do? Your intention was evil. We're on to you. It's a fucking slammer for you. And how did the judge know that? So the burden of proof that the state has to meet is very, very low in this case. They can just assert, we think you intended to do something, and then that we will criminalize, and then we will punish you for that which we think you might have been thinking and intended. And excuse me? What? Now this is writ large what ideological governments do. If you go through the Soviet government era in the Soviet Union or even Eastern Europe, that they didn't much care. Alexander Solzhenitsyn even made reference to this in the Gulag Archipelago and other works that he did, was that the government doesn't fear criminals. They do fear people who have different opinions. And they're worried about those opinions because they may encourage others to have that opinion. They may plant that seed of thought in other people, whether directly or indirectly, but it's something you have to, root out with a sharp scalpel real quick and punish these people, send them to the Siberian work camps in Eastern Soviet Union and punish them severely. And everyone has to know how severely you punish these people. Intimidate, harass their family, do all sorts of things, but you've got to deal with this. But the guy who commits a few murders or armed robbery or hangs out in back alleys, beating people up and stealing their women's handbags, I mean, it doesn't matter. Hey, that person's no threat to anything. Sure, you don't want that sort of stuff on the streets. Okay, there's that. But they're not a threat to you and your power. And so you can tend to ignore and dismiss them. Now, Mrs. Connolly's thing was that she complained about the mass migration. She complained about mass migrants. She complained about all legitimate things. Hey, what's wrong with that? Complained about it and made, I would argue, emotive online postings about this, and that was what they wanted to punish. And but again, in the judge's sort of summary is we can assume and infer and even dream up what we think you might have intended. So we can say you intended to incite hatred. We don't have to prove that you did. We just have to say it, and then on that basis, we can throw you in the slammer. Inciting hatred, just like Hitler. Now, this, of course, is quite ridiculous. I would argue is quite ridiculous. Now, I've looked at goings on in ideological courts. I physically sort of got my face in the door and had a look, and this is very much how ideological courts work. The evidence is like, if it suits them, they'll use it. If it advances their own position, they'll use evidence. But if the evidence does not advance their own position, they'll ignore it and simply invent it. They'll just infer you intend to do that. It was your intention, that's what you wanted to do. What evidence do you have of that? Well, none. We just say it. We can just assert it, but we only need to meet a very low burden of proof here. Whereas if you want to deny it or refute it, you must meet a very, very high burden of proof. So now here's a case in a divorce court where a father wants to he's being denied access to his children because his ex-wife has said he's an abuser. Now, she's got no evidence of that and no proof of it and so on. And so the man brings along five sworn affidavits from witnesses to say that he gets on great with the kids. There's no sign of abuse of any description of any sort. It's a loving relationship the father has with the children. So remember, this is the divorce court's an ideological court, with ideological fanatics and activists all over the place. So the judge just looks at these sworn. I'm in the court watching this. This is like right in front of me. The judge looks at the sworn affidavits. Oh, doesn't even read them through. Just has a look at them and says, "Well, I don't accept that as evidence." Why? I just don't. I don't accept it as evidence. Therefore, your ex-wife's claim that you're an abuser stands because you have no evidence to refute. Well, I do have evidence, says the guy. But you've just dismissed it. So what? Who cares? And then the judge will add another layer. Well, this is the burden of proof you have to meet. You weren't even in the universe at the time. Or instead of 5 sworn affidavits, you have 100 affidavits. Or these 5 sworn affidavits, the witnesses all must be in the court right now, this very second. Well, I can get them in tomorrow. The man said, no, right now. So again, the judges can play around with the burden of proof and the circumstances in which you must deliver it and provide it. And then say, okay, that's it. You've got no evidence. You're an abuser. So this is very much how I would perceive that they went about railroading Mrs. Connolly. So we say that you were intending to incite hatred. We don't have to prove it. So we now can reverse the burden of proof and say that you have to prove that you were not trying to incite hatred. And you have to, and these are the conditions under which you have to deliver that evidence. And of course, you can't. The burden of proof is so high that no one could ever have met it. Then they say, well, there you go. You can't refute it. So therefore, you were trying to incite hatred. Inciting hatred is against the law, and we're going to send you to prison for 2 or 3 years, whatever it was, 2.5 years, something like that. Now, on top of that, we've got, again, with ideological governments, independent legal representatives don't exist anymore. Every lawyer that's in Britain, Australia, the United, or pretty much, every lawyer is really an agent of the state. So their job is either to directly represent the interests of the state, or to encourage their clients to behave in such a manner that is consistent with the interests of the state. For example, the January 6th people, or any of the people around the Southport protests in the UK and that sort of thing. The lawyers who supposedly represent their clients say, look, I think it's better if you plead guilty to this. Well, why? I'm not guilty. I didn't do anything. Well, look, it doesn't matter. I mean, you were in the proximity at the time. That's good enough. Somebody said they heard you raise your voice, or so, that sort of thing. But I didn't do anything. It doesn't matter. You've been charged, so this is what we have to deal with. So what I suggest you do, says the lawyer who pretends to be representing the client, but in reality is representing the state. What I think you should do is plead guilty, and I think they'll go easy on you. I know the judge is hearing the case, and he's a really tough guy, or she's really tough. I mean, you could get 10 years in prison for this. 10 years under the Terrorism Act or something. You can get 10 years in prison. I mean, what? I mean, your wife's probably going to divorce you, remarry in time. You won't even see your kids. They won't recognise when you come out, Billy Bob. 10 years in prison. And now Billy Bob's now in a state of abject panic. He's almost losing the plot. He's in such a state. But I didn't do anything. No. So look, Billy Bob, this is. I instead of 10 years, I think I can talk to the judge for you. I'm your friend, Billy Bob. I'll talk to the judge. Hey, so if you plead guilty, I think you can get maybe 12 months, 18 months in prison, and then you're out and everything will be fine. You get to see your kids again, and your wife won't divorce you, and this. And you won't be a penniless vagrant when you come out, which you would be after 10 years. So this is a good deal, Billy Bob. Hey, Billy Bob, look, you just agree to that, and I'll talk to the judge for you now. There now, Billy Bob. Now, what Billy Bob doesn't know is that the lawyer isn't representing him anymore, maybe never was. And let's say Billy Bob holds out. This is another way they go about it. Billy Bob said, no, I've committed no crime. I'm not going to plead guilty to anything. I have committed no crime. And if I have committed a crime, then the state can prove it. The burden of proof is on them. Now, what Billy Bob doesn't realise is the burden of proof has shifted. He's now in an ideological court where the burden of proof is on him, not the state. The state need only allege, he has to prove. They can act administratively. He has to go through the whole catastrophe of the legal process. But so that maybe he's got he's not a rich man. He's not a sophisticated guy or something. So maybe he's got a legal aid lawyer or something like that. Or maybe the lawyer that he's got just enough income where he can't get any sort of legal aid or any help. So he's got to pay for this lawyer, which again, I mean, if it goes on for a while, it could bankrupt him, just that. So, and the state's well aware of this. If they don't get you in prison, or fine the crap out of you, they can bankrupt you just through legal fees, and they know this, and it's part of their overall tactics in dealing with you. So Billy Bob then says, well, no, I'm gonna fight this. So the lawyer then says to legal aid. The lawyer says, well, I've been advised by my boss that we're not going to provide any more legal aid for you. So unless you plead guilty, we won't pay your legal aid costs. And by the way, have you read the clause in your contract that if you lose confidence in our representation, which is code speak for you don't do what we say, if you lose confidence in our representation, we can back charge you all the legal fees from word one, which is already at $10,000 or something like that. So Billy Bob looks at that and goes, holy crap. So they boxed him in. They say, well, look, we'll bankrupt you right now if you want, but you plead guilty. We will pay all those legal fees. So that's one sort of tactic. Another one, let's say he's got a private lawyer. He's paying for it himself. The lawyer will then go, okay, look, this could be a long case, Billy Bob. So, you know, you've given us a couple of $1,000 to kick it all off. But if you're not prepared to plead guilty, then we're going to have to prepare for a full legal case. And we want $50,000 paid up front. For example, $50,000 paid. Do you have $50,000, Billy Bob? You don't? Well, can you borrow it? You're not sure? Well, Billy Bob, we can't handle this case for you. We'll have to end it right here and now. Do you want to go in front of the judge on your own without a lawyer, Billy Bob? Is that what you want? Billy Bob, do you want to do that? The judge will put you in prison for 1,000,000 years. Billy Bob's now shaken. He's in a panic. But Billy Bob, look, just plead guilty and I can get you out of here in 12 months. So I'll talk to the judge. Okay, yeah, all right. So that's the way there. So people need to understand now that in ideological government, the entire legal profession is then part of the ideological government. It's not independent, it's not separate in any way. Now, if you look at the case of Mrs. Connolly in the UK, how certainly the proclamations and statements and utterances, the public utterances that have been made by the judges, every one of them, in my view, every one of them appears to be ideological. So these judges are ideologically hostage to the government. How dare these people complain about mass migration? Let's put the motherfuckers in prison. Now, why would an independent judge would have no skin in that game, no horse in that race, and yet they're actively and aggressively partisan in supporting the government's position on mass migration, for example. Why would an independent judge be like that? Well, an independent judge wouldn't be like that. They would just dispassionately look at the facts, and that'd be it. But these judges are like really committed and on board with the whole globalist project. And so they're not in. So we don't have independent judges. This is a bit that surprised me. I thought there would at least be enough independent judges. No judge who would be independent, completely independent and looking only at the law would have, in my opinion, would have put Mrs. Connolly in prison, or even fined her for that matter, or even condoned her arrest. I mean, as soon as the case appeared, in the court, they should have thrown it out. What, you're bringing this bullshit to me, to the Department of Prosecutions and throwing it out. But instead, there's intent, aggressive intent, all the way through the process to make an example of Mrs. Connolly and punish her severely. Now, I don't know how she got the resources to. She's not on a high income or anything, so I don't know how she got the resources to do the appeal. But again, the appeal judges were aggressively on side with the globalist activist position. The idea that your intent was to be, excuse me, from an independent fucking judge. I mean, no, give me a break. So we need, I think, to come to grips with the idea that the entire legal establishment, not to mention media and information and so on, has been captured and co-opted by the globalists, along with the body politic, and that's the reality of today. And the United States may be the only outlier in this, as all across the Western world, they're all succumbing to this activist, activist judicial process where all the lawyers now are agents of the state, and they will happily and aggressively act against your interest, as indeed will judicial officers. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.